I'm not so sure, to be honest, that there's a person in this room, or there's a person outside of this room, that understands the magnitude and effect and cause and effect of the changes that our society is experiencing, rapidly changing. I recently read an article about McDonald's, the big global, they of course are a conglomerate. They have several holdings, not just restaurants, but finding themselves hard to operate in this day and age because everybody wants something fresh and new, and the buzzword these days is organic, and McDonald's is suffering because, in case you don't know, McDonald's is not organic, it's not fresh, and I'm not so sure I care if they don't fail or not. Cut that out of the table, I don't want to lose my life, have somebody show up at my door. We're going to be out from McDonald's, you're going to need to follow me. But the world is changing so rapidly that even a multi-billion-dollar organization stuck and rooted in an idea of just feeding people fast and rapid is struggling. I was also reading I like to read about history, and I was reading about, I like history about warfare. I've never served in the army, I guess the Lord's army, hopefully that counts for something, but I was reading about the French army, and it was after World War I. The French did something very, very interesting, and I'm sure the scholars amongst here, please just kind of suffer with me. But they did something very interesting. The French were part of the winning side, and they fought against the Germans, but they were allied with the winning side, and they did something very interesting. They started thinking about Germany and them being jaded in the war, and there was a treaty that had went out from, actually a treaty in France, and you know the Treaty of Versailles, not to get historical here, but just for the sake of a point, just suffer with me here for a few moments. They said, you know what, the Germans seem a little jaded by all of this, and so they had this fear that the Germans, and it was a rightful fear because the Germans eventually did invade France, but they had this fear. They said, Germany is going to invade us. We know that, and they're not happy as a nation, and they kind of got the short end of the stick, so to speak, in this treaty. So they developed a system, and it was called, and of course maybe you know it, the Maginot Line. And Brother John, the Maginot Line was a tunnel, a series of tunnels. It was a line fortified, heavily fortified, with machine guns, with rockets at that time. And so they said, we're going to wait for the French to invade, the Germans to invade, and if they invade, they'll never be able to cross this Maginot Line. It went for about 500 miles, this fortified, solid concrete trench. Some of them had railroad systems in them so they could rapidly take ammunition from one end of France to the other, or troops for that matter. French were heavily outnumbered. Germany had about Germany was twice the size of France in population. And so they went, and for years they built this Maginot Line, a fortified line to stop the encroachment of Germany. However, they failed to recognize that the world had changed. The Germans had developed technology, much like the French had, but to a lesser degree. There were French at that time, French scholars and French generals, but actually one general that sort of tried to discredit this line and said, you know, we should invest our money in new tanks and new armament. The world's changing. And the French said, no, we're going to do this. We fought World War I, trench warfare. This was how we fought. Men would dig trenches and fire at each other. It was a brutal way to fight. Men literally just diving over the walls and being met with bullets. But they said, we won World War I like this, and so now we've got a little bit of sophistication. We'll win, hopefully. I mean, you know, they I guess, understood another war using the techniques that we use in the Civil War. It took 6 weeks for the Germans to overthrow and overtake the French government. 6 weeks. The Germans had developed tanks that were sophisticated at that time, so they went through the Argonne Forest, bypassing the line, because